In days gone by, visiting the carnival or circus often meant stopping to see the performers. The old-fashioned circus may no longer exist, but some of its greatest sideshow performers still live on in our memories. Here we spotlight 15 of the most renowned freaks, as they were once called. These folks were often just as normal as anyone, but for a physical anomaly. Ostracized from society, they made the most of their situations and gained jobs as circus and sideshow entertainers. So, let's look at some of the strangest circus sideshow freaks that ever existed. Number 15. Serpentina, the Serpent Girl. The original Serpentina, likely born Irene Farrell around 1898, was promoted as the boneless wonder. Advertised as if her skeleton contained nothing but a skull, she captivated crowds with uncanny flexibility, twisting her body in ways that earned her the nickname Snake Girl. Posters claimed she had to be carried from place to place, a dramatic embellishment meant to enhance the illusion. In the 1920s, she performed at the Globe Cafe in Oakland, California, drawing crowds eager to witness her serpentine act. By the late 1930s, she toured with a marine hippodrome, where publicity materials even portrayed her as a scaled sea creature. By 1940, she was appearing at Ripley's Believe It or Not auditorium, cementing her reputation. While the claims of her being boneless were pure lies, Serpentina's contortions blurred truth and trickery, embodying the essence of sideshow performance. She remains remembered as one of the most famous snake girls to ever bend her way into circus lore. Number 14. Alexander Montague. Alexander was one of P.T. Barnum's living skeletons, drawing crowds in the late 1850s and 1860s with a body that seemed almost impossible. His chest measured only 4 inches across, his wrists barely an inch in diameter, no wider than an average thumb. Weighing only 54 pounds, he appeared as if nature had reduced him to skin and bone. Audiences gasped not only at his frailty, but also at the eerie sight of him holding a violin, the instrument looking absurdly large in his fragile hands. Promoters highlighted his extreme thinness as proof of the strange and the uncanny, and for many, his very presence blurred the line between life and death. Behind the banners, little is known of his private life, but on stage, he was unforgettable. Montague's skeletal frame became a living spectacle, both fascinating and unsettling, reminding audiences that sometimes the human body itself could be the most haunting exhibit of all. Number 13. Carrie Akers, aka the Warthog. Carrie Akers was a dwarf fat lady, 3 feet tall and nearly 300 pounds, remembered less for her look than for her fiery temper. Nicknamed the Warthog in circus lore, she briefly worked for Barnum in the late 1880s before storming out after only a couple of years. Fellow performers, and even Barnum himself, reportedly struggled to get along with her. Unlike others who gained fame through novelty, Carrie's notoriety came from conflict. Posters and stories exaggerated her fury, cementing her image as a performer impossible to manage. Whether those accounts were embellished or not, her reputation stuck out, outlasting her career. In a world where many were remembered for their unusual size, strength, or talents, Carrie Akers was remembered for her refusal to play along, even with the greatest showman of them all. Her story remains a curious reminder that in the sideshow, personality could define you as much as unique appearance. Number 12. The Quarterman. Dick Hilburn, billed as the Quarterman, earned his name because he had only one fully developed limb, his right arm. Born in Bladenboro, North Carolina, he moved about using a skateboard, pushing himself with that single arm in a display of grit and determination. Rather than hide, Hilburn turned his condition into a livelihood, running his own sideshow where he also employed Carl Norwood, known as the Frog Boy. Beyond the banners, he worked as a tattoo artist and sign painter, carving out a trade on the Midway. Audiences watched in awe as he managed tasks with ingenuity, embodying a mix of spectacle and resilience. Hilburn performed for decades, remembered not simply for his difference, but for the control he maintained over his own act and career. When people spoke of the Quarterman, it wasn't pity that followed his name, but admiration for someone who made his mark in both performance and craft. Number 11. Sophia Schultz. Well, this is one of my favorites. Sophia Schultz promoted herself as a triple curiosity, a dwarf, a bearded lady, and a fat lady. In truth, only the first applied. Of small stature, she cultivated faint facial hair, producing little more than a sparse goatee, and she never approached the massive proportions of famed fat performers. Still, during the 1880s, she traveled the dime museum circuit, photographed in New York, Boston, and Baltimore. Patrons paid to see her less for spectacle than novelty, yet Sophia's presence underscored the public's relentless appetite for the unusual. Later accounts suggested she may have lived with hypothyroidism, which could explain her stature, hair growth, and cognitive struggles. Beyond her surname hinting at German ancestry, little else is known of her life. She never achieved the fame of more celebrated figures, but Sophia's career illustrates how even lesser-known performers fueled the machinery of the freak show era, proof that in those days, mere difference was enough to fill a stage. Number 10. The Man with Two Faces. Born in Missouri in 1920, Robert Melvin lived with neurofibromatosis. This is a rare condition that disfigured the right side of his face. Cruelly, promoters billed him as the Man with Two Faces and sometimes as the modern Elephant Man, though he was more than a curiosity. Starting in 1949, Melvin performed at Coney Island sideshows, later working with Royal American shows and James E. Straight's Carnival. He often joked he had worked every state fair east of the Mississippi. Hollywood also came calling. He appeared in horror films like The Other, 1972, Sisters, 1972, and The Sentinel, 1977. Documentaries including Being Different, 1981, and I Am Not a Freak, 1987, captured his story with more honesty than the sideshow banners. Away from the stage, Melvin supported his family as a bookkeeper, married the same woman for 40 years, and raised children on the road before settling in Lancaster, Missouri. He died in 1995, remembered not just as a performer, but as a beloved neighbor and father. Number 9. Edward Morake. Edward was a young man of British nobility whose story became one of the most chilling legends of the sideshow. He was said to have been born with a second face on the back of his head, a twisted, disturbing double. According to tales, this face was not silent, but tormented him endlessly, whispering cruel and hateful things at night, driving Edward toward despair. He begged doctors to remove it, but every surgeon refused, convinced the operation would kill him. Spiritualists and occultists offered no relief, and Edward's torment only grew heavier. Isolated and unable to endure the constant anguish, he eventually took his own life. Whether entirely true or partly embellished, his story endured through newspapers, dime novels, and circus whispers. The legend of Edward Morake remains unsettling, a tragic blend of medical abnormality, rumor, and psychological torment that continues to haunt the imagination long after his time. Number 8. Angus McKascal. Angus, known as the Nova Scotia Giant, became celebrated as one of the strongest men ever recorded. Born in Scotland in 1825 and raised on Cape Breton Island, he grew to an astounding 7 feet 9 inches and weighed 425 pounds. His body was extraordinary. Hands spanning 12 inches, a chest 50 inches around, and boots 18 inches long. Unlike many giants, Angus suffered no illness, only immense strength. He lifted anchors weighing over 2,000 pounds, hauled carts with ease, and humbled challengers in feats of endurance. In 1849, P.T. Barnum paired him with Tom Thumb as the tallest and the smallest. Audiences marveled as Thumb perched in his hand or disappeared inside his coat. Though Angus disliked constant performing, his reputation spread worldwide, cementing him as a living legend. He died in 1863 at only 38, remembered not just for brute force, but as a gentle giant whose strength seemed beyond human. Number 7. The Little Half Girl. Freda Pushnik, known as the Little Half Girl, was born without arms or legs, except for a small stump on her left side. Far from helpless, she stunned teachers and audiences alike with what she could do. She threaded needles, solved puzzles, applied her own makeup, crocheted, dressed herself, typed on a typewriter, and even won awards for handwriting. At just 10 years old, she began performing at Ripley's Believe It or Not auditorium during the Chicago World's Fair. Carried on stage on a plush pillow, she would introduce herself and demonstrate her skills with poise. She later toured with Ripley's shows throughout the 1930s before joining Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey in 1943. At the same time, her sister Irma worked as a trapeze artist and dancer beneath the big top. Freda retired from live performing in 1956, though she later appeared in films like The House of the Damned, 1963, and Sideshow. She was a legend. Number 6. Johan Peterson. Johan lived a normal childhood until age 15, when a sudden growth spurt transformed him into one of the tallest men of his era. He eventually reached 7 feet 8 inches, though he often billed himself taller for the stage. In 1934, he moved to Denmark and began performing across Europe, frequently paired with dwarves for visual effect. Trapped in Copenhagen during World War II, he labored in shipyards until the conflict ended. By 1948, Johan reached the United States and joined Ringling Brothers sideshows. At first, he appeared in a top hat and tails before adopting Viking garb, earning the name the Viking Giant. His career was lucrative, allowing him to save a small fortune. In 1950, he appeared in the film Prehistoric Women. Retiring to Gibsonton, Florida in the 1960s, he occasionally reappeared, including a Smithsonian event in 1973. Johan died in 1984, his colossal life brought down by something tragically simple: a fall. Number 5. Alzoria Lewis and Johanna Dickens. Alzoria Lewis, born in Brooklyn in 1912, lived with shortened limbs, extra fingers, and uneven toes. Promoters branded her with cruel names: Turtle Girl, Walrus Girl, and spun fictional Southern origins to sell her story. She crawled on all fours, performed in circuses, and twice married, sometimes using the surname Green. Alongside her stood Johanna Dickens, a dwarf performer born in the 1920s, nicknamed the Bear Girl. Though unrelated, they were marketed as sisters, a pair bound together for the public eye. From the 1930s to the 1950s, they worked the circuits, fixtures of Coney Island sideshows. Audiences came for spectacle, but what lingered was their endurance. Beneath the harsh labels and exaggerated posters, Lewis and Dickens endured decades in an industry that thrived on distortion. Not sisters by blood, but joined by survival, their act remains part of circus history, a reminder of how performers navigated both exploitation and the chance to be visible in a world that overlooked them. Number 4. The Bohemian Twins. Rosa and Josefa Blazek were born in 1878 in Bohemia, joined at the lower spine. From birth, life was relentless, displayed at fairs. Their childhood unfolded under the gaze of paying crowds. At 13, physicians in Paris ruled separation impossible. Refusing despair, they turned to performance, mastering instruments and playing violin duets that gave their act artistry beyond spectacle. By 1893, they traveled to Chicago for the World's Columbian Exposition, gaining recognition across America. In 1910, Rosa gave birth to a son, Franz. Whether his father truly existed or was a publicity creation was never clarified, but the scandal magnified attention. By 1921, the sisters returned to America with Franz for a vaudeville tour, later settling among Chicago's Czech community. Only a year later, influenza struck, killing them within minutes of one another. Their sudden end left behind more than scandal or novelty. It showed the rare resilience of two women who lived and died inseparably, their bond unbroken until the last breath. Number 3. The Ape Woman. Julia Pastana, remembered cruelly as the Ape Woman, was born in Mexico in 1834 with hypertrichosis, a condition that covered her body in thick black hair. She also had gingival hyperplasia, which enlarged her gums and altered the shape of her face. Together, these traits made her one of the most heavily promoted figures of the circus world. Displayed internationally, she was marketed as part woman, part animal. Yet Julia was more than spectacle. She could sing, dance, and perform on prestigious stages, including Broadway. Tragically, her husband and manager, Theodore Lent, profited from her condition and exploited her at every turn. In 1860, she gave birth to a child who inherited her disorder, but the infant died shortly after birth. Julia soon passed as well. Her embalmed body was toured across Europe for decades before finally returning to Mexico in 1972, offering her a measure of dignity denied to her in life. Number 2. Ritta and Christina Parodi. Ritta and Christina Parodi were born in Sassari, Italy, to Maria Teresa Parodi, already a weary mother of 8. The twins were conjoined at the rib cage, sharing a single abdomen but possessing 4 arms and 2 heads. From the start, Christina was vigorous, while Ritta remained frail. Displayed throughout Italy, their parents later brought them to Paris, where they were marketed as Ritta Christina, l'enfant bicéphale. Authorities banned public exhibitions due to their age, yet the family continued privately, allowing doctors and journalists to study them. Raised in harsh conditions, Ritta developed acute bronchitis in 1829. She died at just over 8 months, and moments later Christina followed with a cry, as if survival without her sister was impossible. Physicians performed an immediate autopsy, uncovering mirrored organs, a shared liver, and Ritta's malformed heart. Their skeletons were displayed in Paris, while their brief tragic lives echoed in medical records and even in the writings of Honoré de Balzac. Number 1. Jonathan R. Bass. Jonathan R. Bass belonged to a rare category of performers once called ossified men. Born in upstate New York, he lived with rheumatism since childhood, laboring on the family farm and later keeping books. By 57, his body was fully rigid, and cataracts robbed him of sight. With no close family to rely on, Bass made the decision to exhibit himself in dime museums and traveling shows. Audiences came in droves to witness his skeletal, motionless figure, often strapped upright to a board. Because his jaw had fused shut, he survived on a liquid diet and weighed just 75 pounds. Astonishingly, Bass endured 5 years of exhibition, remembered for meeting crowds with humor and calm acceptance. He passed away in 1892 from pneumonia. His story is more than grim. It's a testament to resilience. Even immobilized, Jonathan R. Bass refused obscurity, choosing instead to make his final years visible, memorable, and strangely dignified in a world hungry for spectacle. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in with us, and we'll see you in the next one.